comrades, and welcome back to a very special episode of the Revolutionary Communist Podcast. A few weeks ago, we mentioned that this is really a podcast unlike any other, and that is because this is the official podcast of the Revolutionary Communist Party. Now, what does that mean? It means we're not just here to discuss ideas, philosophy, history, politics, as important as those things are. Ultimately, this podcast is a tool and a resource for every comrade, every communist across the country, just like our newspaper, to help answer questions related to how can we fight for communism today and how can we fight against the capitalist system. Our job is to give you everything that you need to win other communists, to build the party, and to change the world. But before we can do that, I think it would be worthwhile for us to have a discussion about what actually is the RCP. And to help us answer this question, we're joined by Joel, a leading comrade of the RCP here in Canada. Joel, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me on.
So, why are we launching the RCP here in Canada?
Well, if you have been paying attention, if you haven't been living under a rock, the capitalist system is not doing so good. It's destroying everything. It's like society has been gripped in a downward spiral of catastrophes again and again, and an inability to get out of it. You have wars, constant wars, which are basically imperialist conflicts between the major powers. You have collapsing living standards. You have climate catastrophes. The 10 last years have been the hottest years on record. The system is obviously not bringing us forward. And this is the logical conclusion of a system based on a tiny minority of individuals owning and controlling all the productive resources of the economy and basically producing things for their own personal profit. And everybody listening to this podcast feels it. Everybody knows that this is true, that something has gone terribly wrong. And we are here to fight back against this, to do something about it. All the major parties are not doing anything about it, or they're doing directly harmful things because they are the parties of the capitalist class. And they're attacking working class people. They're implementing policies in favor of the bourgeoisie, in favor of the capitalists, to the detriment of the vast majority of the population, of the working population. So, we are communists. And there are many of us. There are more of us than you think. You think you're alone? You are not alone. The polls show there are hundreds of thousands of us, even in Canada. And so we are here to plant our flag on the political soil of Canada and to say, you are not alone. Join us. Let's organize ourselves to fight back against this horrible system. So that is why we're launching the Revolutionary Communist Party. Ultimately, it's this absolute disaster facing us of capitalism. And things are not getting better. Everybody knows that things are getting worse. What happens if we don't do something? That's the question. We have to do something. We have to fight for a new society, a new system. And that's why we're organizing the Revolutionary Communist Party in Canada.
Related to this question, why are we founding the RCP, is also the question of why now? Because, hasn't capitalism always been a system that makes life terrible for working class people in Canada and around the world? What is it that's changed in the situation so that the founding of this party makes sense today?
Well, I guess yes and no, in the sense that capitalism had its heyday. It certainly was an improvement over feudal Europe, I would say, and you can see that quite clearly. But it's been in a terminal decline for a while. As an economic system, it's been in a decline, and I believe that has accelerated over the past number of years. It's not the post-war boom anymore. In a country like Canada in the 50s and 60s, you had high growth rates. This is the period in which the welfare state was established, most notably the healthcare system, the free universal healthcare for everybody. This is a big conquest of the working class that fought for that. You had pension systems. You have good union jobs for unionization used to be at 40% of the population were in unions that would protect your living standards. You had unemployment insurance, things like this. You had basic maternity leave. But all these things, because the system has entered into a period of decline, it is a really terminal decline. I believe the system is dying. It's dragging all of these things down. It's attacking living standards, attacking all of these things that made life semi-bearable in Canada as a working class person. You could own a home. Who can own a home now? Nobody can own a home, you know? You can barely pay rent, or very few people. You have to have a 6-figure salary at least, I think, to even think about it. So, millions of people, like I said, are realizing it, and millions of people are actually considering themselves communist, or sort of don't want to have anything to do with this system. They can see it in every aspect of their life. So yeah, that's why now. I mean, there's been lots of attempts in the past decades to create communism, create a communist party to fight against the system, which was kind of a losing battle when the system was healthier, or it was a lot harder. But now, as the system is clearly decaying, it's clearly on its last legs, we feel like it is more pertinent than ever for communists, you know, going back to the Communist Manifesto, communists disdain to conceal their aims. And we just stand up and say, we're here, we're the communists. Mm-hmm. We don't like the system. We're fighting back against it. And they're literally, polls showed last year, there's literally 1 million young communists in Canada. And we're trying to reach them and organize them.
Are we having any success with this? Like in terms of reaching these people, these conscious or unconscious communists around the country?
Well, so far, I would say yes, given the situation. Not enough success, actually, but some success. We've been appealing to people since last summer. We've been appealing to communists who, if you're a communist, get organized. And we've been fairly inundated with thousands of people that have responded, yes, I want to get organized, I'm a communist. And so, we've seen our organizations really taken off, you could say. It's exploded. And we think we just scratched the surface. So if you're a communist and you're listening to this, you should be a part of this. You should sign up, get on the boat, you know? We're taking off here. So we have had a lot of success. We pretty much doubled our membership in the last number of months since basically the beginning of last fall. And like I said, I think this is just the beginning. I think because capitalism's not getting better but getting worse, that more people are starting to draw these conclusions. More people are questioning the system. More people are looking to do something about it. More people consider themselves communists. So we've been having a lot of success. We had most notably the Montreal Marxist Winter School, which is a big weekend educational gathering that we've organized for, I think 14 years now. Was absolutely massive. Well over 600 people were at that meeting. That's actually where we announced the launch of the Revolutionary Communist Party, and the mood was electric in that meeting. But this is the type of thing that's how we had over 600 communists in that room alone in Montreal. Now we're having meetings, big expansion, new cells of communists being established in cities all over the country, where I wouldn't even dream of doing it before. Small towns even. Groups of communists coming out of the woodwork and establishing a local cell of the Revolutionary Communist Party. So I'd say we've had a lot of success. Obviously it's not enough. I think each of us has a role to play to keep this process going, to find a new communist, to find these people in society and get organized. So I would just appeal to people listening to this. If you're an unorganized communist, I think that is a contradiction in terms. You have to get organized, and we're that party that's trying to do that. So, we've been quite successful, but obviously nowhere near where we need to be.
Mm-hmm. Well, you talked about like an unorganized communist, the contradiction in terms. Who are these communists? What is a communist? Because ultimately, you look at, especially Canadian American history, the word communist has been dragged through the mud for decades. So now when it's used, in kind of regular political conversation, it can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. It's very loaded. So what is it that we're talking about when we're talking about these communists that are out there that we need to meet and that we need to organize?
Yeah, this is a very important question because, it is a loaded term. Communist. What does a communist mean? I mean, you grow up in Canada. Canada's the little brother of America, of the United States, which is the anti-communist country of the century, the most powerful capitalist nation that carried out a kind of McCarthyite smear and slanders against communism. So a lot of people have mistaken ideas about communism. But communism, in its basic essence, is it's not even something that Marx invented, to be honest. It goes back a long time to the belief that we don't have to have a system. We don't have to have a system based on private profit. We don't have to have a class-based society. Actually, humans have not always lived this way. We don't have to accept these. I think if you just look at it for a minute, you look at society, I'm like, there's a tiny minority, these billionaire, and quite parasitical. I mean, I think capitalists are parasitical by their very nature, but there's an increasing number of people that literally don't participate in production at all. They just invest in all manner of schemes, and they make billions of dollars and off of our backs, essentially, off of our labor. So yeah, communist is someone who doesn't agree with that, who doesn't like that, who doesn't accept oppression, who does not accept exploitation, who does not accept falling living standards, who does not accept all those arguments from the capitalists, and believes that the wealth of society, which is immense, which is absolutely immense, the productive capacity of society, the wealth produced by the working class should be in the control of everyday people, and that we can rationally plan the economy to work harmoniously. So we don't have mass poverty, you don't have exploitation, you don't have wars, you don't have environmental destruction. So yeah, a communist is somebody who believes in a different society. So yeah, if you, and I really would emphasize that, because if you don't believe in that, give up, accept it. This is the best that the system can offer. This is known as doomerism. I think there is a large layer of people that have essentially looked at the society, and because they're not communist and because they do not believe that there is a different way, you just get very depressed. So I think we have to fight for a new society. Communism it's a belief in a new world. It's nothing more, nothing less than believing that we as the working class can control society and can rationally plan production and society democratically in harmony with the environment. I think if we did that, we could achieve great things. But right now it feels like, in spite of all the advances technologically, in spite of all the advances in the economy, it's kind of like we are victims of the system. And you see that every day. So communist is somebody who wants to do something, wants to fight against that. And that's why I think there's lots of people that haven't read a damn word of Marx. They haven't read any Lenin. They've not read a bunch of communist literature, but they're communists. They're communists in their heart. Mm-hmm. They are communists and they want to change the world. And so we're here to say, yes, you are a communist. Great. Let's organize ourselves and let's figure out how we can do that. So the RCP is also here to help people learn how we can fight back against the capitalist system. You not just be a communist in words, but in action.
Yeah, I think to take a bit of a step back, because the point that you made, that a communist is someone who believes that another world is possible, and they see through the facade of like capitalist civility. They see the homelessness, the desperation of hundreds of thousands, millions of people in Canada and around the world. There is this stigma or this assumption that I think has been really embedded in a lot of people's consciousness, that like communism is something that comes from without, like it's kind of projected into people's heads by a handful of organizers, a handful of like revolutionaries. This is kind of the McCarthy era propaganda. This is what we are largely taught communism is, but it's actually something that evolves organically. It's something that a lot of working class people arrive at as a conclusion just by virtue of living under capitalism. And so in a really contradictory way, this deep crisis that we're going through, this existential crisis of capitalism that we're witnessing on a day-to-day basis, is producing some of the most, militant communists that I've ever met in my entire life, that we've probably seen in decades.
Yeah, 100%.
In Canadian history. So, when we're seeing these two things, the depth of this crisis in Canada, and also this wave of radicalization that's kind of coming as a consequence of this, what are the other parties doing about this? What's anyone actually doing about this here in Canada? apart from us.
Well, that's precisely the problem. Like I already mentioned, the main parties of the bourgeoisie, they're precisely harmful. Justin Trudeau is, I mean, I don't know what he's doing. Like, what is he doing? It seems like moving the deck chairs around on the Titanic, to be honest. And just changing the window dressing a bit here and there. Trying to give it a bit of a progressive veneer, but it's not really changing anything. Nobody's lives are getting better under this government. That's very clear. I mean, that's why the government's plummeted in the polls. But then Mr. Pierre Poilievre, it comes around, and he's doing a bit of a Trump game. He's railing against Trudeau, largely on economic issues, and he's tapping into some of that anger. But his solutions, he's not actually talking about solutions most of the time. Why? Because his solutions are laying off public sector workers, attacking public spending, attacking social services. This is not going to make anything worse. The cure can be worse. The so-called cure can be worse than the disease. So I think, someone like Pierre Poilievre is just more of the same, more of a brutal approach to things, more of a libertarian approach to the economy, which will make the situation even worse for working class people. So the bourgeoisie aren't doing anything good, to be honest, are doing precisely nothing good. And then you get to parties like, you have a party in Canada like the NDP, the New Democratic Party, which is a labor party founded by the trade unions in the 60s, nominally a socialist party throughout its history. But the thing is, it's a minority liberal government, and the NDP are propping them up. So basically, you're having the biggest collapse in living standards probably in the history of the country, with a liberal government propped up by the NDP. And the whole justification for this is that they're getting some concessions. Meanwhile, the liberals are funding Israel, giving arms to Israel that's carrying out the Israeli state, the Israeli imperialism that's carrying out a genocide in Gaza, in Palestine. Everyone can see it. So the NDP can say, well, we won diabetes medication, which I don't believe has actually been implemented yet. They're dragging their feet. But I just ask, is genocide worth, is it worth diabetes medication? I don't think it is. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that that's actually going to solve the problem, because people pay for diabetes medication. But you basically give them free diabetes medication, but their living standards plummet. So what are you getting? You're not getting ahead anyway. So I guess this is, it is like moving the deck chairs around on the Titanic. It's trying to create a progressive veneer for a horrible system. Those are the main sort of parties. There is, and this is related to a broader question. The dominant trend in the Canadian labor movement for decades has been what we would describe as reformism. It's been the belief that you don't need a revolution, you don't need communism, you don't need to overthrow capitalism, you don't need to do away with it. We can just sort of tinker around the edges. You can sort of round off the sharp edges of the system. And in the post-war boom, that seemed to work. This is precisely why Canada is not a land known for communism. Communists have not done terribly well for a long time. You'd have to go back all the way to the 30s. Or I guess, Quebec had its own dynamic in the 70s and 80s where you did have some more sizable communist groups. But generally speaking, in the history of Canada, communists have not done very well. And the dominant trend in the labor movement has been that of gradual, slow, small reform. And that's best exemplified through the NDP. But even in the labor unions have fight for little things. But I think what a lot of people are starting to realize now is this is patently ridiculous. The ship is going down, and you're changing the coat of paint on the outside. You know what I mean? I think it's a good example. It's like everyone can see it's going down. So your little tinkering is not enough, and it doesn't actually accomplish much. And actually, not only is it the little tinkle, in many ways the tinkering actually goes in the opposite direction. Actually, it was the NDP that argued in 2020 for the government to pay the wages of private companies. Yeah. It was actually to prop up the system. Basically, a corporate subsidy. This is not what we need. So this is the failure of reformism. We say betrayal is inherent in reformism. You see that, I believe, with the NDP and Palestine. They basically sold the Palestinians down the river for a couple of small peanuts. If they wanted to stop arms expenditures to Israel, they could bring down the Trudeau government. Instead, they're playing political theater, passing a non-binding nonsense motion through the parliament that does absolutely nothing. So, yeah, I think this is the failure of reformism. Nobody's doing anything. This is precisely why we're launching the RCP. It's a party like no other. It's a completely different party. We're not reformists. We're revolutionaries. Now, what that means, a lot of people think, oh, no, revolution. No, revolution is simply normal, everyday, working class people like you and me trying to take matters into their own hands, trying to take our destiny into our hands. And I believe a revolution's coming. Yeah. We've already seen revolution all over the world, and the RCP is a party that's actually building in preparation. You don't have to be a genius to think that if this continues any longer, people are going to blow up. People are going to explode. And that's precisely what a revolution is working class people can only take so much. And we need to prepare. We need to prepare so we can actually make sure that the future revolution wins. Other parties aren't doing much, and we're trying to prepare for revolution in Canada.
I mean, I think one question that comes to mind is, what does it mean to actually build a revolutionary party? Like, are we painting the Titanic red before it goes down? Like, are we going to run in elections? What's the strategy here? Because for a lot of people, I mean, I've never seen a mass revolutionary party in my lifetime. It can seem a bit abstract or a bit off in the distance. What is it that we're trying to build here?
Yeah, that's a good question. We're not a parliamentary party. We're not going to run a whole bunch of people in the elections. There's been many parties that have done that, and they've wasted all their time and the resources doing that. And the parliament, I mean, did you watch the proceedings of the parliament? I mean, I have a little bit. I think most people don't. You listen to 5 minutes and you turn it off. It's a boring talk shop where nothing gets done. Or actually, it's not true that nothing gets done. They fast track really bad things, and anything that's at all remotely going to help working class people is like delayed and dragged through the mud and amended down till it's almost nothing. So this is not a very central thing to Marxism and to communist beliefs and ideas is that about the state is this is not our state. This is a state. The Canadian state is a state quite horrible in its origins, actually. It was a artificial creation brought over and imposed on Indigenous people and on working class people and immigrants and people of all backgrounds. And it justifies the exploitation of a tiny minority of capitalists at the top. And so that's been the main role of it. Now, there's been a bit of window dressing put on there, but our main aim is not to get people elected in the parliament. Not that we wouldn't potentially do something like that in the future, but the whole point is we are a party like no other, that we are a party of regular, everyday working class people in society, day in, day out, every week, fighting to build a new organization that fights for a new society. So this is a party, if you've ever been involved in a different party, like the Green Party or the NDP, or maybe someone's listening that was involved in the Liberal Party, I don't know, you realize that they don't care about you. They don't care about you. You don't do anything. Every time the only time they talk to you is if they want you to give them money, or they want you to help them in an election, so you can get their mostly rich dudes in suits elected. That's not what we're trying to do. These official political parties are a cesspool of corruption and careerism. This is not what the RCP is. The RCP is a party of regular working class people that are fighting to transform society. And I do believe that's not something that can be done every 4 years on the election cycle. That is definitely not something that can be done. Yeah, we're involved in, for example, in the Palestinian movement. We're very active, showing solidarity fighting against imperialism, fighting against Israeli imperialism, fighting against our own imperialists who are aiding and abetting this mass slaughter. And we're putting forward a communist solution. We actually say this is a task. This can only be stopped by a revolution, actually, by intifada. Mm-hmm. Not just in Palestine, but in the whole Middle East, and actually in countries like Canada, and especially America. Actually, I believe the polls now show that the majority of people want this to stop in America. They're not in favor of what Joe Biden is doing. But yeah, I believe you do need a revolution to bring the government down to stop this. So yeah, we are a party, and that's not parliamentary. That's revolutionary. I do believe you need revolutionary means to achieve the aims, which is to stop the genocide. So that's just one example. But we have members, we have comrades, we have cells in unions, in different neighborhoods, in schools, who are reaching out to people, who are putting forward a communist solution. Every week, basically. So it's not just a parliamentary thing. I do believe it is a battle of ideas that needs to be won in the population. And I believe in the working class and youth, there's a very good situation. It's very ripe for communist ideas to take root because people can see, they feel the crisis in their lives. And all the other ideas in people's minds that would normally be present about liberalism or reformism or stuff about Canada. Canada's a peacekeeping nation. Nobody says that anymore. You know, the belief in reformism it's weaker than it's ever been, and people are looking for a lot of people, a radical kind of alternative to capitalism ultimately. So yeah, we're a party. We're building in the masses actually. Mm-hmm. In neighborhoods, in schools, in workplaces. Yeah, and it is a party that is also in the hands of the members. The members determine the activity, actually, of the party. It's not like a few people in an NDP office determining every damn thing that happens and then expelling you if you criticize them, like you had with, for example, Sarah Jama in the Ontario NDP, who criticized Israel, and then she was ceremoniously expelled from the party. Wow. Is quite ridiculous. We're not that type of party. So yeah, we want to be the most advanced members of the class, I believe, that fight for a new society. So yeah, that's how I guess that's what make the RCP different. I don't know of a party like that in Canada. So other than us. So if that speaks to you, you're listening to this. Yeah, this is your party. This is the party for anyone who hates the system. This is the party for any communist. This is the party for anyone who wants to fight back against all of this horrible stuff that's happening around the world.
Mm-hmm. And if there are any groups or parties like that in Canada, please let us know. We would love to talk to you.
Yeah, definitely.
But I guess related to this, I mean, you mentioned, the communists in Canada in the 1930s. You mentioned Quebec in the 1970s. All over the world, there have been dozens, maybe even hundreds of attempts by communist parties, communist groups to really build this revolutionary force and to lead, mass revolutionary movements. And overwhelmingly, I think almost all of them have failed, except for maybe a handful of exceptions. What is it that sets us apart from these sorts of groups? How can we avoid, the mistakes that we've seen in Canada and around the world in the past?
Yeah, that's a very excellent question, because if you're a communist today, you can be filled with an overwhelming feeling that what's the point, because it always failed before. The Soviet Union failed. China has returned to capitalism. You got, what are we going to do? And there's been the history of capitalism is, or so far being the important point, is the history of failed revolutions. There's been work. I could name probably over 100 of them. There's been failed revolutions all over the world. But I mean, that's to be expected. If we had successful ones, we wouldn't be talking here. Mm-hmm. We'd probably change the course of history. But I guess there's a couple important points. What sets us apart? What makes us think that we can succeed? One, the objective situation. So capitalism has never been so global, I believe. It's spread to every nook and cranny of the world. The Soviet Union collapsed. Russia is fully capitalist. China is fully capitalist. Globalization has done this. And therefore the proletariat has never been bigger. it's increased in size over the last couple of decades by hundreds and hundreds of millions, maybe even over 1 billion. I don't even know. And as Marx described, the proletariat are the grave diggers of capitalism. So that makes me quite hopeful. Because in the past, there were, like in China or in Russia, the majority of the population wasn't proletariat. They were peasants. That actually made it very difficult / impossible to build communism in those countries without help from other countries. And we saw what happened. But today, you don't have any country like that. So one, there's the objective reasons that I do believe this. The objective situation today, the economy has never been more developed, the working class has never been bigger, and also the crisis, I think this is the worst crisis of the capitalist system that we're living through. You'd have to go back to 1929 or something, the Great Depression, to see anything worse. I don't know, it's probably worse in scope. So there's that gives us hope that we can win. But that alone is not going to determine victory, because you also have to know what you're doing. So there is a rich history of Marxists, of revolutionary communists fighting for communism. And we often say that Marxism is the memory of the working class. So it's not like failures happen. I was actually in a meeting last night and we had a discussion about Chile in the early 70s, where you had a lot of lessons from that. It didn't end well, let's put it that way, if you know anything about it. But it's not like it had to go that way. It could have been different. And it could have been different if you had better ideas. So, Marxism is the memory of these past struggles. It is the lessons. And so what we try to bring to millions of, or hundreds of thousands of communists, is an understanding. How do we fight? It's not just that we want to fight. How do you fight? You should actually know how. You should probably learn something from previous attempts. So we put a pretty big emphasis on Marxist theory, which is a guide to action. So, and I believe that in the Revolutionary Communist Party and in the international Marxist tendency, the international that we are a part of, we have theory, we have ideas, we have a high-level understanding of what is happening, what has happened and why, and what we can learn from the past, and how we can actually succeed in the future. So, another thing that sets us apart, which we've already kind of hinted at a little bit, is because we have theory, the guiding action. It also leads us to the inescapable conclusion that we can win. The workers can actually win. Just because we failed in the past doesn't mean we're always going to fail. No, I actually believe that we, as a class, or our class, the working class, can fight back and defeat capitalism. I believe it's going to happen in our lifetimes, maybe sooner than you think. I think we can fight back and win, but that's contingent on us learning the lessons. Marx famously said of the Parisian workers in the Paris Commune, which was actually the first time workers ever took power. They took power in the city briefly. He said they stormed heaven. That was his words. And I believe that working class people are getting really sick of this shit. And they can storm heaven. We believe that we can storm heaven. And with the correct ideas, the correct methods, we can fight back and actually win. And we can transform society. And I do believe that point is important, because I don't believe that actually any other significant tendency in the movement in Canada believes that. I think most people have accepted capitalism, at least in action. Sometimes in words they might reject it, but then what they're doing leads you to believe that they actually don't think that we can fight back and win against capitalism. We believe that we can. And that's also one of the reasons why, if you're a communist, you should join us. You don't want to join an organization that ultimately believes you're going to lose. We can win. We're more than them. We are more than them. We're much, much more than the small layer of capitalist parasites at the top. And if we organize, I believe there's nothing on earth that can stop. If you organize with the right theory and the right ideas, there's nothing on earth that can stop the working class. So that makes me very confident. So I think that these are a few of the things that sets the RCP apart from other organizations and gives us a bit of confidence that we can actually win.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we've talked about this on a national level, on the scale of the party as a whole. I mean, I've been keeping up with some of the write-ins that we've been getting from different cities, different towns across the country, places I've never even heard about.
Yeah.
Of people who are writing really just inspiring messages about how they want to fight against capitalism. They'd rather die fighting the system than living under it.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm thinking about, you know, when I was first kind of coming to communism, I was living in a small town. I had no idea what was going on. What advice would you give to people who are really on their own, who want to fight against capitalism, but don't necessarily know where to start? What can they do in practice? What advice would you give to them as to, you know, a direction they can take?
Yeah, this is very important because, like I'd said previously, there's people coming out of the woodwork everywhere. Small towns all over the country coming towards us. We have new cells popping up in the Maritimes. We have new cells popping up in rural Ontario, all over Quebec, in the West, in Alberta, or BC. And I think one of the most important things when you begin is you gotta have you gotta be determined, and you gotta be bold. Because what's happening now is capitalism is causing reverberations throughout society. Everyone's questioning. And there's a lot of people, there is a significant, it's still a minority, but it's a small layer that are looking towards communist ideas. But it's a minority. And so in any town, what is it, a few percent of the population that are communist? Maybe 10% if you're lucky. But that's a lot of people. But it is a minority, and it's probably mostly young people, but it is a minority. So, and we have been, like we talked about earlier, we have been raised in a society that kind of systematically attacks communism and teaches you that it's wrong. It teaches you that it's the opposite of what it actually is. Quite often people say, I don't want to live in communism because I don't want a small group of people controlling everything. I'm like, well, guess what? You live under that system. That's called capitalism. That's not what communism is. Communism is the working class controlling everything. And that's the majority of people. You actually having a direct say in how society runs. But yeah, back to the point. What are you supposed to do? So to the boldness, the successes that we've had is when you've had someone who was determined in a city. And what they did is they just put up posters and stickers around the city, maybe around campuses. If there's campuses, that's usually pretty good. Bus stops, whatever, that just say, are you a communist? Join the party or get organized or whatever. Just announcing, maybe even a specific poster about the city. We're the communists in the city. Contact us to get organized. And then what always happens is a whole bunch of people see it and contact you. So that's the first step. And then you contact them, you meet up with them, you discuss politics, you start a cell of the RCP. Then you got to have discussions, education. We got a lot of education. We got a lot of documents that you can discuss that help. We have actually one thing we should talk about is we have just launched a manifesto of the Revolutionary Communist Party, which describes a lot of what we're talking about today, of why we're doing what we're doing, what's going on and how we're going to build this party. That's a good document to have discussions on with people. Bring your friends, bring your buddy from high school that used to talk crap about capitalism, Find the communists, unite them together in a cell, and actually just contact us. Let us know, hey, we want to be a cell of the Revolutionary Communist Party. We'll give you advice. And then I guess another thing we have, we're just launching this new party. And one of the ways we're launching it is we're holding rallies on this Saturday, April 6th, in major cities, in a lot of cities around the country. But in particular, we have Toronto, Montreal, Edmonton. We're going to have a rally in Vancouver, I believe, in other smaller towns. And the idea is, so if you're in one of those, if you're in any of these towns, just check us out online and come out to the founding rally. There'll be speeches about the party. There'll be speeches about why we're doing this. And then we've announced the party. We're founding the party. A big part of that is we have a founding Congress. It's going to be in May. So I would encourage everyone to build your cell, create it. I think boldly take the step in that direction. Anyone who's done that just declares, we are here. We are communists and we are here. The success builds success, just being bold. and then be a founding member of the party. Basically, build your cell, send delegates to the Congress in May. And so really, that's I guess to give a little bit of advice, like that's the main thing. So that's where you got to start. You just got to build the cell of the party. I think also you shouldn't just be aloof. You should be involved in movements. Like if there's strikes, show solidarity with the workers. Go there, show them who we are. Have discussions with them. Palestine movement, that's a big one. We should be going to those rallies, participating. And also you find communists in the Palestine movement. We found a lot of communists in the Palestine movement. And then organized a fight for a revolutionary communist perspective in the Palestine movement. So I guess that's some advice that I would say, some like pretty basic advice about how we would, or what you should do if you're new and you want to build, you want to do something. You're a communist, you want to do something. This is what you can do. It's a very realizable first step. Build a cell of the party. Get others, find other communists, get them involved. Come to the founding rallies this Saturday. Another thing is we haven't really talked about that, but this podcast is kind of an adjunct to our paper, Communist Revolution, or Révolution Communiste in French. Which is a monthly publication, and it is a tool. It is a way. I'd say order some copies on the website. Go to our store on marxist.ca, get some copies of the paper, and you can use that to sell it to your friends, to people that you meet in the movement, and you can use that as a thing to discuss with people. It also has great advice for communists from around, or examples from around the country of what different people did that actually worked. So, there's a bunch of stuff to do that I just mentioned. We're building to the founding Congress. Found a cell, get some papers, sell them to your friends, start those discussions, and really build that communist voice in your area. I think that's the most important thing, is that we have to get organized. We have to show people that we exist.
Joel, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you a lot for having me on.
Thanks again for listening, comrades. That's all for us this week, but if you'd like to hear more, we'll be back again next time with a discussion on why communists sell newspapers and on the importance of the revolutionary press in building the party across the country. And if you'd like to subscribe to Communist Revolution, to read the manifesto of the Revolutionary Communist Party in our April issue, I'll add a link in the show notes below. And if you'd like to join us to start building a cell where you are, I would encourage you to reach out to us through our website at marxist.ca/join. I'll add details to all of our April 6th rallies across the country below as well. And finally, last but not least, a professional revolutionary party requires a professional approach to party financing. In order to keep up with the massive growth our organization has undergone in the last few months, we are aiming to develop our national headquarters in Toronto, renting out a new office and hiring 3 new professional revolutionaries to help us on our full-time staff. Any donation that you can make will help go towards toppling the system and building a world worthy of human beings. See you next time, comrades.